Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guests today are two Vietnam War veterans. First, I'd like to introduce you to Chuck McEnroe. You are a veteran who was in the Army, yes?
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Bill Nabinger, and you were a Marine in Vietnam.
Yes.
Yeah, welcome. So, we haven't seemed to solve the problem of war. We look at it still as a viable option, and we seem to be engaged in some war a lot of the time. And one of the reasons I wanted you to be here is because it's very easy to look at war as something out there, but actually to put a face on it and what the experience was, because war is war, and the impact happens to everyone. So, Chuck, I'd like to ask you, when you went to Vietnam, you were in the Army. Did your number come up, or did you volunteer?
Okay, I was drafted. As a child, a teenager, I hung out with guys that were at least 2 years older than myself. So a lot of those guys were drafted. I saw them go to Germany, I saw them go to Korea, and some of them actually volunteered to go to Vietnam. So they had all experienced it, and I was expecting, it was the thing to do, and I was expecting to do that. But when I did get my draft notice, I was going to college at night, and I remember I started driving, which I thought was the route to school, and I found myself going over the George Washington Bridge because I was so preoccupied with the thought of being drafted that I went in the wrong direction. Okay.
So, and I can imagine, but, well, actually I can't imagine, but the thing is, so you had these friends and they talked about their military experience. Was what they said frightening, or did it kind of sound glamorous? What was your connection to what they said?
It was a mixture, and I felt very fortunate because when I was drafted and I had to go to basic training, one of my friends just got out of basic training. So he painted a picture that was terrible. And in fact, at one point it got me in trouble because it was very hot, and usually you have your pants inside your boots. So it was so hot, they said, roll them up. And I said, are you sure? Because I expected them to treat me like dirt. And he goes, everyone except for him can unblouse your pants. So it kind of worked against me. So I guess I went in with an expectation of the worst possible scenario, and it really wasn't that bad.
Okay.
Basic training.
Okay. And when you were in basic training, how many guys were you with? I don't even know the terminology. I mean, are you in a unit?
It was a company. They were old wooden barracks. I don't know the exact number. Maybe there's 22 barracks, and maybe there's 20 barracks.
Okay.
Okay. And they teach you very quickly the art of being resourceful. Okay. It's like, so they have all these barracks, and they have like 4 mops. And it's like, you guys work it out, okay? So you learn how to acquire things, and it's almost like MASH, and people acquiring things. So
yeah. Okay. So, Bill, you were in the Marines. Were you drafted, or did you volunteer?
No, I volunteered.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 18 years old.
So, when you volunteered, what were you thinking at the time?
Well, the real story is my buddies were all 2 years older than me, and my best friend, Dave Martin, best 2 friends, Dave Martin and Doug Martin, both twin brothers, were my best friends growing up and everything since 6 years old. And Dave had went into the Marine Corps 6 months before I graduated. And we grew up sort of like a wild bunch of guys. Like, we're in top physical shape, lift weights, we'd run 10 miles. I mean,
So you kind of were into that kind of
we
challenge.
were into, we played sports, we were jocks, we didn't back down from anybody or anything. And
so they went into the Marines. Did they volunteer, or did they get
Dave
drafted?
went. One of the twin brothers went, Dave, 6 months before me, and I kept remembering, I kept saying to myself, like, there's no way my best friend Dave's going to Vietnam without me, and he's not going to come back here with bragging rights.
Okay.
So I was
Off you
kind of
went.
like gung-ho kind of guy. And so I went to his house where his twin brother was, Doug. I knocked on the door. He came to the door. I said, Marty. His last name was Martin, so I called Doug Marty all the time. I said, Marty. I said, I'm joining the Marine Corps. Are you coming with me? And he stands there and he takes this piece of paper and he goes, "Shh. I was drafted in the Army. We got to get me out of the Army first." So he had to go to Newark and bust some chops up there until they finally told him, "Get out of here, son. Go join the Marine Corps."
So you're 18 and you think it's like,
Yeah.
full of, excuse me, piss and vinegar, and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And so now you're in the Marines and you go into basic training. What was that like?
Well, I had some friends already that went through there, and they kind of gave
Just
me
like
a hint.
Chuck, yeah.
Gave me a hint that, stand at attention. Everything is sir, yes sir. You started with a sir, end with a sir. Keep your eyes straight. Don't look either way.
So did you do all that?
Yeah, I did really good, but I was in top physical shape going into boot camp. Boot camp to me was not hard, except for in those days they actually physically would beat you up. They'd punch you in the stomach, just walk by. They'd make you do tons of push-ups for every little thing they made up in their mind that you did wrong or somebody else in the platoon did wrong. Anybody that did something wrong, the whole platoon, which they were teaching teamwork to you, you would all do push-ups. And I went through in August. I joined August 2nd. It was so hot, I had puddles of water in front of me in what the Marine Corps calls it, not barracks, as they call it, squad base. But same thing as a barracks. But yeah, but I was in top physical shape and I was good to go, and I could do, and they made sure you slept at night, They didn't really keep you up at night. But when we left there and went to infantry training was a whole different thing, where you didn't get much sleep. You're always out in the what we used to call the bush, the woods. We'd be out there and running all kinds of tactical maneuvers and this and that. And I'll never be in this great shape in my whole life as I was coming out of boot camp. Anybody, right, Chuck?
In all of this, you haven't gone to war yet, you haven't gone to combat yet. So is there some piece of you, I'll go back to you, Chuck, that is still thinking, rah, rah, here I come, and did you end up being angry at anything that happened in boot camp?
Yeah. Well, basic training was 3 months, and then advanced infantry training is 3 months. And the Army was very similar. They believed in group punishment. If one guy messed up, we all suffered for him, and we started to police each other's actions, and it does build team. Okay, so I was pretty much anxious, kind of gun-ho, if you call it, and I paid attention because you never know when you have to be called on these things they're teaching you. Okay, so I wanted to be as prepared as possible. Once I got to Vietnam, it was a different story. And I'll never forget, I was there a couple of weeks before I actually engaged the enemy, and when we fought for 4 hours and lost, people, and I was pretty much taken back the first time I saw someone who was shot, and then it was over, and they said, "Let's go." And I, all the war stories I've ever saw on television was like, once you secured that land, you stayed there, it was yours. And now we fought, guys lost their lives, and we're walking away. And I said, "So what's this all about?" And one guy told me, "This is what we do." And I saw it was
Kind of hit and run.
Yeah, it's hit and run, and there was no end, at least in my mind, to what it means. What are we doing? Tomorrow's the next day. And being in the 1st Mobile Unit, 1st Cavalry, we did a lot of that because they would pick you up from one location, prep an area with artillery, drop you in it, and sometimes you engage the enemy, sometimes they're not there, sometimes you got to walk a little bit, but you engage them, they run away, and you go back someplace. It seemed like it was a very mindless, operation.
Okay, I want to ask you, day one, there you are. What's happening inside of you, day one? Are you terrified? Are you mystified? Are you taken aback? The heat, whatever?
Well, day one, getting off the airplane, it was like stepping into a sauna. I lost my breath, okay? And then I learned something perhaps I should have learned from the Marines, and don't make eye contact with anybody. So I made eye contact. Next thing you know, I'm lifting the duffel bags of the people that were on the plane with me. And I bent down once, I was soaking wet. I mean, soaking wet. And but I was kind of fortunate because I was in the rear area for a few weeks, and that usually doesn't happen. And the reason being is my unit was moving down from the DMZ down to Saigon to set up for the 10 offensive. So they kind of kept me in the rear. And that was another lesson that I learned, that the people who are stationed in the rear have it kind of, I mean, we all have our experiences. They have to deal with mortars. Infantry guys deal with firing one-on-one. But these guys, they always used to keep a few grunts back there to do duties because they didn't want to do duties. So they would sleep in their cot, and 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 I was one of them. I didn't realize it then.
You were a grunt?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
a grunt, but I was kept back as a new guy doing duty, like filling up sandbags, restoring bunkers, KP, kitchen police, things of that sort. So I knew very quickly that that's why they kept me back there and waiting
Right.
for the company to come out of the mountains in the DMZ.
Right.
So.
I have a lot of questions, more questions, but I now want to get to you. So now you're sent to Vietnam. Day one for you.
Well, first of all, we went over on ship. There was 2,500 Marines on a ship and 500 Army. Now, 500 Army guys were the 101st Airborne. And airborne, I scratch my head and go like, what are these guys doing going on ship in Vietnam? They're airborne. But anyway, I spent 21 days on ship.
21 days. With 3,000 men.
3,000 men, yeah. It was like the ship was tilted because everybody was in the head like barfing up. I didn't. I used to stay. I even slept on deck. They let us sleep where we wanted because they knew it was going to affect a bunch of guys, So got through that. Well, they stopped on the way over at Okinawa, and they had a Navy club on the beach called Whitehead Beach. And they let us off, the 2,500 Marines, for 4 hours. And they said,
Oh, my
you can't go off this complex here. You have to stay
Right.
here. And the Army was left off all day long, all their 500. So they went into town and everything. And we never saw town, but we sold out the Navy Club. Beer cans all over the freaking thing. We stole boats. We had bonfires, guys jumping off the ship. It was a bunch of drunken Marines, but we all helped each other back on the ship. And we all knew that one thing that we all realized when you go into Nam or when you first get there is it could be your last day on earth, because we're not stupid enough that we don't know that you could die here, And so you lived life to the fullest when you could, and you didn't care, and you
Right.
and you had each other. And when we finally got there, we were in the middle of a movie. They showed movies on the ship. I'll never forget the movie because it was the best movie they showed on the ship, and they shut it off halfway done. Spartacus.
Oh, my God.
Kurt Douglas, Spartacus.
Right.
And they shut it off, and we're going to the Penang Harbor.
Right.
And you could hear in the background all the rounds and the explosions and
As you're coming in.
yeah, as you're coming in, and I thought to myself, well,
This is it.
here it goes, man, one day at a time. And then when they let us off, we went to different designation parts of the dock, or whatever you
Right.
want to call it, and we were all assigned to what outfit we were going to, because I went as a replacement in the infantry. So I went as a rifleman. I was going to go to India Company, 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines. So right away you start asking guys that have been there a while about India Company 326, and I'll never forget, they were telling me, like, India Company won all the war games in the Philippines, so they're the spearhead of the 26 Marines, which means
You're
any
the first
combat,
in.
you're going to be the first guys because you won all the war games. And I'm thinking to myself, oh man, this is great. I'm going to a great company, And then they fly me in a helicopter, me and 6 other guys, who one of them became my best friend in Vietnam, Patrick O'Brien from Virginia, great guy. They flew us in there. When we got in there, out in the jungles, when you're in the infantry, when you're a grunt, there's what they have, a perimeter. but it's not really a rear perimeter, but there's a perimeter set up with foxholes and barbed wire, and it makes you feel safer when you're inside of there, but you're really not safe anywhere. Because the grunts would be outside the wire 2-3 weeks at a time, or on an ambush at night, and then come back the next day. So when I got there, they were already out in the field, my company. So I had to wait till they came back in. But while I was there, they had action the night before. They had a human wave on them. They got attacked by the North Vietnamese. India company killed 58 of them, and we only had one guy wounded. And I remember Chuck going like, "Holy crap! I just got here." And then I'm thinking to myself, nothing else can happen, then I'm going to go out on patrol. I mean, they just took care of business.
Right.
The first night I'm out on patrol, we hit an ambush. We had a patrol, well, it wasn't really a patrol, they sent us, I went out with my new squad on an ambush that we set up, and you lay there all night waiting for him to come through. And by the way, he got over there in the hot weather. I got there monsoon season where it just rains for 6 straight months. I was soaking wet from the time I got off that ship. But yeah, the first night was an ambush, and they, when you're new, they would team us up with a guy that was there a while. Now, the original 326 India company that I was joining had gotten in Vietnam 3 months before me.
Right.
So they were just getting broke in, 3 months, and they were in stuff already. And they stuck me with a young Indian. His name was Tin Elk. And they said, "You do whatever Tin Elk tells you to do." So we're laying in the middle of this ambush site, and I could hear him coming. I could hear the gooks coming. And Tin Elk's got his head down. And I'm going, and he looks up, he goes, "My God," he didn't say a word, just go, but I said, "Tin Elk, they're coming, I hear him." You know what he says to me? This Indian hardly ever said anything to me, and I had to stick with him. He said, "We'll get him when they get here." And he put his head back down. But he was a great Marine, trust me, he was unbelievable. But, the attitude was so different when you're a new guy. My eyes were in the back of my head, scared to death. And then what happened was there were too many of them. Our squad leader, a little guy, Kenny Kleinens, he crawls along all sides of us and says, "We're getting out of here. I'm going to call artillery in on this estimated platoon." We were only a squad, so we were maybe 12 guys. We're never a full squad, 11, 12 guys. And a platoon is there's about 40 of them, I guess. So
He says, "We're out of here."
We're out of here, and we called artillery in. I'm going to tell you something. I had great leadership, guys that were smart, guys that were actually I was fighting alongside of guys that left Wake Forest to join the war to fight, I mean, guys like that. All-state football players, guys that were just, and criminals too. Criminals, the guys that would say "Nab, Officer O'Grady's missing me, man, in Brooklyn. He used to pick me up every Friday night and put me in jail." I mean, the characters you meet and the brotherhood, it's just incredible, the brotherhood.
It's an experience that nobody, I'm sure, who hasn't been in fully gets. But I want to ask you, so he's talking about lying in the field and ambush and whatever, you're there brand new. Mm-hmm. Are you terrified?
Yeah. I think about the questions that I kept bugging the guys, because I finally met up with our group, my company, and we moved down to the Saigon. And it's amazing how we flew around a helicopter, and they prepped an area, and then they came in with gunships, and then we went down. And then shortly after, they brought in bulldozers, and they started blowing up trees, and they basically made one of these secure area, an LZ, landing zone. And then they sent us out, to do a mission. You go out a few 100 yards, and then you come back and you sweep. And I kept asking this guy, "How will I know? How do you know who to shoot? Do they have pajamas? What do they dress like?" And he says, "We are in the middle of the jungle, okay? You're not going to see them. You're going to hear them. You're going to hear their guns before you even see them. Sometimes you don't even see them." And I kept asking, "Well, how do I know? How do I know?" And
so how did you know?
Well, he's right. You hear the bullets first, and then you realize where the bullets are coming from. So the first 2 days was kind of interesting because all we did was build bunkers, okay? So here you got jungle, they flatten out the area, we're building bunkers, and guys used to get packages from home. And I'll never forget, one guy got a big bottle of Jack Daniels, and here we are in this bunker we just made, and this really big, rough guy, they're passing the bottle, and I extended my hand to grab the bottle, and he grabs it from me, and he says, "I'm not drinking after some Cherry," and Cherry is a new guy.
Right.
I haven't experienced war yet. So I said, all right, that's cool. We went, we drank. The next day, they sent us really far out. Anyway, we hit, we engaged the enemy. And this same guy was behind a log crying for his mother. He was, "Mommy, Mommy." And I poked one of the guys, and I'm going, what's with him? Like last night, I was scared stiff of this guy, and now it's like, he's like a little crybaby. And I said, oh, no, that's what happens sometime with him. So you kind of learn who you can trust and who's got your back, okay? I'd like to bring up another story, because it really affected how this first time in combat, how I behaved. And when I first came in country, everyone's issued new things. So you're green, your outfit, your boots are brand new, they're black, they're shiny, and grunts who are in the field are dirty. I mean, visualize someone who hasn't bathed in 30 days. Well, I saw one of those, okay, this guy. And he had his shirt was ripped like a muscle shirt, and he was transferring, I learned later, from the Miracal Division to the 1st Cavalry. And he went to the front of the line, and the lieutenant questioned him, "Why are you getting to the front?" And he basically used every profanity there was, climbed up one side of this lieutenant and down the other, "Sir, you blah, 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 sir, you this." Long story short, the lieutenant let him get ahead of the line, but I was afraid of this guy, okay? In fact, he was in my barracks. I moved to another barracks. I saw him walking down the street. I crossed the street, okay? And then I forgot about him. And as I mentioned before, I was assigned to my unit. And finally, the company came down, and they looked at me, and I was always kind of a big guy. They go, "You'd work good in the gun squad. You're going to carry ammunition. And you're really lucky because we have this very experienced gunner." And they take me to this tent, and it's this crazy guy. His name is Paul Robinson.
The guy you've been crossing the street to
and I've
avoid.
been avoiding this guy. I'm scared stiff just as his appearance. And he looks up at me, kind of nonchalant like the Indian. And he looks up at me and he goes, "When we hit," I assume I can say this, "when we hit the stuff, if you're not there with the bullets, I'm coming after you." And then he looks back down. It's like, that was the only dialogue we had. So when we first
So you make sure that
had
you...
combat, I swear, I grabbed all the ammo, everybody's ammo, and I would go, more ammo, and then what happened is that we ran out of ammo, okay? And then he goes, "Give me a grenade launcher," okay? Again, so it was a different type of weapon, and then I had to go look for more ammunition. And I was more afraid of Paul Robinson, who was very aggressive. This was his 3rd year. The other lesson I learned, it doesn't matter if you're a private, a lieutenant, or whatever. When you engage the enemy, it's those that get up there and do. And you could have privates telling lieutenants what to do, and probably platoon is a good
It's
example.
not like you see in the movies.
Well,
It's
it's
the
not.
guy with the biggest,
The guy with the most experience, and the guy
jumps
with
up
the
and he
biggest
takes charge and
guns,
does
if they
his
say,
thing,
as they say
Right,
yeah.
in Italian.
So-
So, I learned that as well. And so Paul Robinson was one of these guys who's right up front, and Paul Robinson and I became, I remember him when we went back, he says, "You did good, Cherry," and then, he actually acknowledged my name after that, and we became really good buddies. And I wasn't the only one that was afraid of him, because we were on other maneuvers months later, and it was I'll never forget, bunker complex, and we're progressing through it, and of course he's lead with the machine gun, and I'm carrying ammunition for him, and he stops, and he was like this. He'd say, "You hungry? I need something to eat. What do you got? You got any sea rations?" And he'll start eating. And so on the radio, the captain would say, "What's the holdup? We got to get moving." And I say, "Well, Paul's having something to eat." I would say, "Let me know when he's done." I mean,
So his reputation,
weapons
So,
preceded him.
Bill, so we talked about, so now you're in Vietnam, and you're with this more experience. They've been there about 3 months. What was your experience like the first time in combat, I'm trying to get like an 18-year-old. You're in this foreign country. It's raining nonstop. Bullets are shooting around. Does it seem surreal? Are you terrified? Are you?
Anybody that isn't scared should be locked up and sent out of there because there's something wrong with you. Anybody that isn't scared about dying or what's going to happen or all that, even the big tough guys, they know. They know. They're trying to show a leadership role. The older guys, don't forget, the older guys in Nam were only like maybe 20 to 22 years old. They were the old guys. I was in Nam at 18, had my 19-year-old birthday in a foxhole with rockets coming in on top of us, and all my other buddies in the foxholes around me were yelling, "Happy birthday, Nab, how do you like this party?" I mean, the Marine Corps guys, grunts, infantry have a sense of humor like you would think like they all need to be locked up. But
Well, I would think you have to.
Yeah, but every one of them will tell you they're scared about it all. But you do your job and you take care of each other and you watch each other's backs. I mean, really watch. If you talk about if this country could be exactly like the Vietnam Veteran Brotherhood is and was at that time, like this, you'd have people taking care of people over here like you wouldn't believe.
One for all for one.
It's an incredible experience in a lifetime. I would do it all over again. And I could tell you, I was in 16 major operations in 9.5 months. I've been wounded 4 different times. I got 2 presidential unit citations. I've done it all. I've had fixed bayonets taking hills. I've had hand-to-hand combat. And the only reason I'm sitting here, I'm lucky. That's the only reason. A lot better guys than me never came home. And you can take that to the bank. I'm just a lucky person.
Yeah.
Very lucky. And I don't forget, and we all share what we call PTSD. America thinks guys with PTSD are nuts. We're not nuts. It's a post-traumatic stress disorder that we think about our brothers next to us that never came home. We're afraid to go to sleep at night because we're on watch all night long. You'd be in a hole with another guy, and the other guy would be his watch for the first 2 hours, and then he would whisper to you, "Hey, Nap, it's your watch." And you'd be awake, and you'd get up and watch because you wanted to stay alive. You wanted to win. You wanted to. And every time one of our guys died, we didn't recluse about it. We just said, we're going to kill them. We're going to kill as many of them as we can. And when we left Vietnam, we said, we're sorry to the guys who replaced us that we didn't kill enough of them. And that's how you have to live, and that's how you have to feel if you want to survive. It's a survival of the fittest. It's a survival of who can suck it up and who can do it. And he flew into battle, in helicopters. Like, there was no, like, he humped too, but not as much as like I was a ground pounder or grunt in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps didn't fly anywhere except our recon guys that would just drop them way ahead of us to find the enemy, and then they would call the grunts to go get them. Well, we would hump sometimes 10 miles a day, up and down mountains and hills and not find anything. We found it relieving at times because when we would hit combat, that night we would dig in where we won the battle at. For one night, we could dig a hole and rest. We were glad to stop. The weather, the bugs, the humidity, the monsoon, the rains never stopping. The conditions a lot of times were worse than fighting in the battle, you know?
Wow.
Because you're doing all that, you're going through all that to get to these people, to beat the enemy, you know? They weren't a good people. The North Vietnamese Army had been fighting for 100 years, but they killed their own people. We're a humane society. Anything you hear about Vietnam vets killing innocent women and children is far from the truth, far from the truth. We gave them sea rations. We passed through their villages and throw them cans of food to the starving kids. Americans, our military guys are the most unbelievable guys you would ever. American people don't know because they weren't there and they never asked us. You know, the media knew all about the Vietnam War. Yeah, right. So did the American people. You know, where were our parades when we came home? Why did my mom stand in the kitchen and go like, I don't know my son anymore? You know, why did I work 2 full-time jobs? Why I had nobody. I went to the VFW and the World War II guys would sit there at the bar and go like, that's not really a war. And my father, who was an iron worker, would be grabbing me by the neck, pulling me out of there as I was screaming and yelling I was going to kill every one of them. They had no idea. The Vietnam veterans, we killed 1.4 million and lost 58,000 men.
We never lost one battle. We were the greatest fighting force in the history of this nation, and nobody knows what we did. 240 days in combat was the actual tour of duty for guys like me and Chuck. World War II was 40 days. There was no comparison. In 2008, my captain, retired Major General Caulfield, did a speech at our reunion in front of the Marine Corps Museum. And he said, he gave us all these stats, and that's what generals do. They're good at stats. And he said, in the history of the United States Marine Corps, and my best friend Dave Martin was standing about 10 feet in front of me. I always find the back of the room and hide, even in school. But he said, in the history of the United States Marine Corps, no battalion was in more operations or encountered the enemy more than 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines. And he said, on September 10th, 1967, which is this article here, that was in August 6th Vietnam magazine. It said, goodbye 326. That's the Vietnam, North Vietnamese Army retreating back to Vietnam. And that's our outfit, part of our outfit, all there fighting them. His company, which was my company, India Company, took on the brunt of the attack. And I didn't even know this till 40-something years later. And he said that he only had 12 men standing in his company. I was one of the 12. After the battle, we had hand-to-hand, everything, taking, I don't care what nationality he is, when you take somebody's life with a knife, my K-bar, and I see that guy's face my whole life. And I also killed 2 of them real up close with my .45, and I killed hordes of them with my M79 at the time, because our M79 man, a few weeks before that, got his head blown off, my buddy, Oscar Palacio.